Howdy, boys and girls, and welcome back. It is week 9 of the college football season. Week 9, there's at least 1 week each season where one of the two of us, me being Crappy and her being Carla, where one of us has sworn off college football. It is like, no, this game is stupid, and I'm never watching it ever again. I don't know for sure, but I think I don't know for sure that she's still feeling that way. But I think Carla mentioned something like that on Saturday. Right?
I did. Yeah, I swore off college football on Saturday after that abysmal overtime that should have been a Penn State win. And we'll talk about that. I have thoughts.
Yes.
We have lots of things to talk about in regards to that game.
We have
because somebody is very cruel in that regard and is going to force me to talk about both teams this week. Thank you very much.
That did occur to me. And just as a heads up, AJ's not going to be helpful either. So, well. But I
hate you all.
That's perfectly fair. I understand it completely. And as you know, I've been in your shoes. I've
yes,
been,
you have.
You know, it's whether it's, you know, kind of bitter defeats, like college football semifinals, it was a catch, or, you know, just kind of out of nowhere, upsets. It is part of the game's charm. Even though you don't feel very, very charmed right now, I'm sure.
So they tell me. Yeah, no, it was real hard to put this shirt on tonight, but I'd saved the shirt specifically for this show. And because this is our traditional rivalry week.
Yes.
And also apparently my Halloween costume.
Ah, okay.
I am going as a Penn State fan because I don't know if I actually am still one.
Of course you are. Come on. Stop. Carla has her lovely navy blue Penn State t-shirt on. I am wearing my road white #1 jersey for Justin Fields. I actually would not wear this if there was going to be a whiteout in Penn State this week. That's just a superstitious thing that I have. But given that, I mean, I don't. There are going to be some ushers, or I don't know. There might be people in the stands.
Not many.
I
don't know.
I don't actually think I noticed, and this is the thing that I actually wanted to mention, because the Big Ten's rules were no fans. There were a fair number of people, so I don't know what the definition of like friends and family is. But like, you know, watching your game last week, certainly there were there was a like this cluster in Memorial Stadium in Bloomington of Penn State fans. And it's enough that you can hear crowd responses, which is kind of cool. I don't know. I there's stuff that's being piped into, I'm sure, but so I don't know. I don't know to what degree that's actually what I'm hearing, but it is kind of cool that there are people there. So
yeah, I think it was mostly family. I mean, that was every time they went back up into like the show people that were there, they were always referencing somebody's parents. Yeah. So I'm guessing that most of it was family or like very, very, you know, or people who travel with the team. But yeah, I mean, it is cool that like, I'm happy that parents of players get to go into games. Yeah, if that's it is that is letting in. That it should be that way. You know, let the parents of these kids in.
Yes. They should be #1. And as we've discussed before, students #2, and then pretty much screw everybody else, because they're just, they're old people like me who just want to go see the football games. But so before we continue on, anything else from last weekend not involving an Indiana Hoosier that got your attention?
Sure. A couple things. Well, we started off on, let's talk about happier things. Like,
yes,
the fact that when the Big Ten kicked off on Friday night, a cold front rolled through Nashville. Like literally it was simultaneously. At the time the game was kicking off, the cold front was coming through Nashville, and it's like, hallelujah, it is finally fall. And I watched a good chunk of that game on Friday night. And Graham Mertz, I don't know if you're following the conversation that was going on Twitter. I was talking with we mentioned him last week, so hi again, Braden. Braden Gall, who is here in Nashville owner now of the 440 Sports podcast network. He's a Wisconsin fan, right? So he's got Big Ten roots himself. And I posted something he posted something, and I said, is there a quarterback controversy brewing in Wisconsin? Because Jack Cohn is out hurt. Graham Mertz is legit. Holy cow.
Yeah.
He looks real good. Like, is Jack Cohn ever going to see time under center again in Wisconsin?
No.
I don't think so. If I'm Jack Cohn, I'm like packing my bags for the NFL at this point. Like I'm like, okay, yeah, it's been fun. See you later. Mertz was impressive. Holy cow. I think based on what I saw out of the we did an entire Big Ten show last week. Based out of what I saw out of what was going on in the West, I think Wisconsin is heads and tails above everybody else in the West right now. Now, true, it was against Illinois. I get that. But like, that offense looks good. That defense looks good. Like I think Wisconsin is still the team to beat in the West. So it was really fun to kind of have them get that spotlight on Friday night, to be able to really devote time to watching that game, because that kid looks like he's going to be legit for a while.
I think so.
The other fun thing from this weekend, two quick things. We exchanged text messages, and that was on Twitter. I can't remember what we do via text and what we do publicly anymore.
Just typing stuff in my phone.
I'm old.
It doesn't matter
I'm typing
where.
things out. Yeah, exactly. But the Rice quadruple-doink.
Doink.
On the field goal. Yes. Yeah. Holly Anderson used to be from Bleacher Report, now from Banner Society or wherever she is now, had a running thing where if you hit the post more than twice, like you should automatically, like you should get those points, right? Because that's really hard to do. Like if you're going to bounce the ball off the upright twice, like you should get credit for the field goal. She was going berserkers on Twitter over a 4. She's like, that should be worth like 6 points or something.
That's a kicker touchdown. What that is.
You couldn't do that if you tried.
No.
I mean, it was just the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life. If 2020 was a field goal, that was it. And the funny part about the whole thing is that, I feel bad for the kid, because you couldn't do that if you tried. You didn't get any points for it. And then his football team lost the game to my MTSU Blue Raiders.
Correct. Yes.
So yeah, wins have been few and far between for my boys from Murfreesboro. So, yeah, we'll take it however we can get it. But yeah, bonkers. And the last thing I wanted to mention was, I think after you all had gone to bed, AJ might've still been up watching football. I flipped over to the World Series.
Okay.
And if you didn't see the World Series on Saturday night, I think the World Series took a cue from Mountain West football. Because it was one of the craziest baseball games I've ever watched in my life. And at one point I posted, is there such a thing as World Series after dark?
Huh.
And I posted that. And then the game ended up in a walk-off play that is a play that you've never seen before. Almost as bizarre as the quadruple doink from Rice. So I'm going to say that World Series after dark, if a World Series game is being played on a Saturday night when there's college football being played, which can happen again because this is like normal time for the World Series. I think that's a thing. I think World Series after dark is taking its cues from what's happening in college football. And welcome back after darkness. And the World Series lived up to it. That was that was just crazy. Like, thank God something made me just kind of be happy with sports again after I was just football is awful.
Nice. Football sucks. Yes, I agree. No,
that was
I don't.
My weekend.
Yes. Okay. My observation, being the myopic Ohio State fan that I am, has to do with Michigan and Minnesota.
Yeah.
And specifically, the thing that I took away from that game is, does Harbaugh finally have a quarterback? I was fairly impressed with Joe Milton. Not great, but promising. And he's a junior, so ostensibly he's got, you would assume he's got a couple years ahead of him. 15 and 22 for 224 yards, 25 yards, and a touchdown. He rushed for another touchdown, gaining 53 yards on the ground. He looks like he looks poised. Seems to have a decent grasp on the offense. I did not see anything that was obvious confusion. Good speed. So kind of a dual threat dish guy. And this is, this is the first quarterback that has started from Michigan that Harbaugh recruited. So, for all the stuff, I make fun of the quarterback whisperer thing. But this is his first guy. The question I have is, obviously, you guys have heard me reference Shea Patterson as being kind of mediocre. He was fair at best at Ole Miss. I saw kind of the same thing, and that's borne out by the results. When in the 2 years he was a starter at Michigan, why couldn't Joe Milton beat him out? I wonder. Because he looks like the upside at least is much higher. So I don't know if that's some kind of weird loyalty thing that Harbaugh had for a quarterback who left the SEC and transferred to Ann Arbor. So I wonder about that. But on its face, Joe Milton looks like a promising addition. And was a big part of why Michigan looks so impressive in beating Minnesota on Saturday. Mm-hmm. AJ, and he's not necessarily, he's wrong some of the time, but not always. But he's going to tell you that there are a ton of killer group of 5 games this weekend, and that you should watch all of them. That's what he's going to say, instead of watching the games that we're largely going to talk about. In some instances, he's correct. In others, he is not. But you guys can make up your own mind. And here's AJ to give you this week's Group of 5 report. AJ, it's all yours.
Hello, everyone. It is this week's Group of 5 report. We've got ourselves a barn burner this week. Last week was the return of the Mountain West. We had 3 games after 9 p.m. on Saturday. They were glorious. Wyoming and Nevada took it to overtime with a second-string freshman walk-on kicker nailing a 42-yard field goal for Wyoming to send it to overtime. Come on. Real football is back. And I'm not talking about the fact that Penn State lost to Indiana on the greatest play of all time. Doink. Mountain West football, though, just providing for all of us in these spooky, spooky times. Thursday, October 29th, Colorado State plays Fresno State. Colorado State favored by 1.5 over under 59. 10 p.m. game on Thursday the 29th? Yes, please. Fresno State looked okay. Not great against Hawaii, but they are still rebuilding after their Mountain West season of 2 years ago. So they are on their way back up. Colorado State coming fresh into the season. This is their first game of the season. Their game last week was postponed. I actually believe they went with a full no contest, and they will not be replaying that game. But Fresno State looked okay. Colorado State is a much more talented team, and the line reflects that. Friday, October 30th, Hawaii travels to Wyoming. I mean, is there like a much more disparate environment for these two teams? Like Hawaii, the beautiful island, Wyoming is Wyoming. Like, Hawaii looked fantastic last week. Hawaii's running the ball. You may remember their head coach is Todd Graham after Nick Rolovich left for Washington State. So yeah, Todd Graham has a job again, everybody. And they're running the football, and they were running it great. I mean, Chevin Cordero is their quarterback. He threw for 229 yards, ran for another 116 and 2 touchdowns. So they have a really good quarterback again in Hawaii. Surprise. Wyoming is just playing grit ball. They're gonna play hard. They have a really good young quarterback who made a really brutal late game mistake against Nevada. They still were able to take it to overtime and lost, but this should be a fantastic game. That's on Friday night. It is the only game of note on Friday night, so you should watch that. That is at 9:45 on Fox Sports 1. We will also turn our eye to Saturday, October 31st. And this is where the Fun Belt and Mountain West come together to form just a spectacular day of football. But before we get to the powers that be in the Sun Belt and the Mountain West. We have to cover one game from the American Conference, and that is Memphis going on the road to Cincinnati, noon at ESPN. It's time for Memphis to ruin the AAC. What they have on deck here is if they beat Cincinnati, they are going to knock Cincinnati down to a one-loss team, which would then put them all kind of into one big bunch up at the top with Houston and Tulsa and SMU. So we could, in essence, start to get into like deep tiebreaker territory. So let's go Memphis Tigers. Memphis obviously coming off of the big win against UCF and not having a look-ahead game against Temple last week. They get Cincinnati at home. And that's going to be hard for Memphis. Cincinnati plays incredibly well at home. They have a ton of talent. Luke Fickell has recruited incredibly well there. So this should be the barn burner of the noon hour. Please do not watch Michigan and Michigan State. Also, at noon, Coastal Carolina, ranked Coastal Carolina at number 20, 5-0 in the Sun Belt. Travels to Atlanta to play Georgia State. Coastal Carolina just looks fantastic. They had to replace their starting quarterback, Grayson McCall, in the last game. The backup for Coastal Carolina looked fantastic as well. Stumbled a bit. They weren't as dominating as they have been this year, but he still looked great. And as the game went on, he got better. So I expect Coastal Carolina to win here. The line is 2.5, over under 61.5. That's at noon on ESPNU. On ESPN3, Troy, the trusted Troy Trojans, travel to Jonesboro to play Arkansas State. This game should just be dumb and fun. Arkansas State's favored by 3 with the over-under 72. I mean, let's have ourselves a ball here, everybody. Arkansas State just rotates quarterbacks. They're just fun to watch. Troy plays a bit more of a running style, but that game is on ESPN3, so you will need to find a streaming device. Highly recommend doing so. And then we'll jump over to 6 p.m. on CBS Sports Network, at the Network of Champions. Boise State goes to the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado to play at Falcon Stadium. Boise State came out and just absolutely romped in their opening game, although they did feature one of the greatest punts of all time, where the punter punted it off of the back of the up man and lost 38 yards. Just true magic there. Boise is favored by 14. They are still the class of the Mountain West until proven otherwise. Air Force came out, whomped Navy, did not look great against San Jose State last week. We'll get to them in a second. And so, yeah, I expect Boise to come out and whomp Air Force too. We'll jump to San Jose State. Let's put a little funk on San Jose State. San Jose State has not won a Mountain West game in quite some time. They did beat Arkansas last year. And that's why Chad Morris doesn't have a job. But San Jose State is a not great program, but they seem to be turning a bit of a corner. I hope that this turns out to be much more like the Fresno State story of 2 years ago, where they went from like 0-12 to winning the conference. San Jose State deserves more. They've put in a lot of work. San Jose State is actually favored over New Mexico by 13.5. That's because New Mexico is real bad. Just in general, they're just not a terribly talented team. And San Jose State looked great. So San Jose State favored by 13.5. I expect them to win. That is at 7 on Fox Sports 1. 8 p.m. ESPNU. Louisiana plays Texas State. Texas State gave BYU a little bit of a little heartburn. Tough to swallow at first. Then BYU took it the rest of the way. But Texas State, again, they're going to put some heartburn in your chest. Louisiana, 4-1, still looking great, still fun to watch. I reckon this is at 8 p.m. on ESPNU. We have proper like channel flipping games now. You can actually flip between a bunch of games now. Speaking of which, 9:30, San Diego State, now coached by former Michigan head coach Brady Hoke, going home to San Diego, travels to Logan to play Utah State on CBS Sports Network, the network of champions. San Diego State is going to hurt you. They're just going to kick your chest in. That's all they're going to do. They're not going to throw the ball that well. Carson Baker, the quarterback for San Diego State, was 12 of 25 for 137. They're not a throwing football team. They're going to do what San Diego State does, which is run the ball down your throat and then through your esophagus, down your chest cavity, and into your stomach. They are very, very good at that, and they absolutely whomped last week. I fully expect San Diego State to do the same thing to Utah State. Utah State did not look great last week. They played Boise and got whomped, and it showed. So, yeah, San Diego State, I think, has another run here and another run and another run after that, because that's all their offense is going to need to be, and I expect them to cruise handily. And finally, closing out the evening at 10:30 p.m., God's football game. Nevada going to UNLV. They're playing in the new Raiders Stadium. Nevada showed some grit, showed some heart, pulled it out against Wyoming. They're very good. They're going to throw the football a lot. Carson Strong was 39-52 for 420 yards and 4 touchdowns against Wyoming last week. I expect them to do the same thing here. UNLV is fine. They are not great. They are the team that got whomped by San Diego State. So I would expect Nevada to come out. They're favored by 14. I would expect Nevada to come out and ruin some days, but I could see UNLV maybe coming out and wanting to show the world what they're made of in their first home game at the new Allegiant Stadium. This has been your Group of 5 report. There are other conferences, but the Sun Belt and the Mountain West are the only ones that matter this year. Please watch Group of 5 football. You don't just have to watch Big Ten football, but if you do, watch James Franklin lose his mind when he loses again. Back to you, Carla. Back to you, Crappy.
Thank you, AJ. Carla, he called you out.
AJ, I thought we were friends. We went to college together. I was your producer for a while. I thought we were friends. This is the I love you but, right?
He is or was at one point a closet-ish Ohio State fan. I never fully got the explanation for that, but that was a thing at one point, at least. I don't know if that's the case now or not. For what it's worth. Here's where AJ was correct. We're going to start with our games at noon on Saturday. Number 20, Coastal Carolina at Georgia State. Coastal is only favored by 2.5 points. Fun Belt, Carla. Instead of the Michigans, I think AJ is totally correct on this decision. What do you think about this one?
Again, I said this last week on the show before I put on the cloudy glasses of college football thanks to my beloved Nittany Lions. Coastal Carolina is the team we all need in 2020.
Yes.
I really believe that. This is a team that hasn't done anything. They've only played in the Sun Belt for 2 years. They're new to FBS level. And they've already surpassed their win total combined between the last 2 seasons. Like, if that's not the team we need in 2020, I don't know what is. Vote Coastal Carolina. That's my thing. You know, like I would wear a Vote Coastal Carolina t-shirt right now. I love this team. And what's interesting is the fact that, like, you know, I didn't know a lot about this team other than the fact that they just kept winning football games, right? Like, I watched them play against Kansas on that opening night, and it was just kind of like, whoa, what's going on here? And so I don't know a lot about this team. And I went back and I looked, and last weekend, Coastal Carolina beat, I think, Georgia Southern was who they played.
Correct.
With a backup quarterback. Mm-hmm. This team has mettle. They've got resilience, right? This is a team that lose your starting quarterback and still go out and win a game against a team that can be dangerous in the Sun Belt. That's a big deal. And it's a big question right now heading into this game is who's actually going to start at quarterback. Right. Their starter is Grayson McCall. He's still hurt. Fred Payton is the guy who led them to victory this past week. He's had a few starts at Coastal. He's got some experience, and he led the team to the biggest win. You could argue it's the biggest win in Coastal Carolina's program history because it was their first time being ranked.
I think from this point forward, any subsequent victories are the biggest victories in Coastal Carolina history, because I mean they are I don't know what the record was in 1AA or where they jumped from, but the season they're having is magnificent.
Yes, it is. And it's just the feel good story that we all need right now. There's a common opponent between these two teams, between Coastal and Georgia State, and that is Louisiana. No, true. Georgia State played Louisiana in week 1, lost in overtime to Louisiana 34-31. Coastal beat Carolina beat Louisiana just a couple of weeks ago 30-27. So you got a 3-point differential. So that tells me a lot about these two teams, and that explains the line to me when they have a common opponent like that and the scores are that close. Yeah, I mean, and Georgia Southern throws wrinkles into the Sun Belt. Georgia State does as well. Because who did Georgia State give a run to an ACC team a couple of years ago that they pushed somebody to the brink? Was it NC State?
That might be.
They pushed a legitimate ACC team to the brink and lost. And so this is a team that has a reputation of liking to just mess things up. Georgia State really stingy against the run. I had to go look that up. But they do have a little bit of weakness in the passing game. They do allow quite a few passing yards. But offensively, they score more points and put up more yards than Coastal. So the line on this game makes sense. I'm going to say that the feel-good story continues. I want a Cinderella in 2020. Like, if we deserve anything in 2020, it's a Cinderella, and Coastal Carolina wears the glass slipper well. Like, we need that team like you do in the NCAA tournament, right? That, like, is that team that, like, makes it, like, into the Elite Eight that shouldn't. Coastal Carolina is my football equivalent of the NCAA tournaments, the March Madness Cinderella. Coastal will find a way to win this game, and they will eke up even further into the rankings. Not by much, maybe 19, like maybe up one spot, but they will be within the top 20 if they can win this football game.
Okay.
Go Chickens.
Go Chickens. I should explain that I did not know until today. I had to look up what the Chanticleer is, and I'm sure people in associated with Coastal would dispute this, but it's a chicken. So, AJ, as I mentioned before, AJ's correct. Don't watch the Michigans on Big Nude. Watch this game. I'm enamored with Fred Payton, who came in last week and apparently just played like his hair was on fire. There were 2 interceptions. There were 3 touchdown passes. This is the absolute advertisement for Fun Belt football. Both teams rack up big yardage. They're offensive oriented. Georgia State's defense is especially suspect, giving up 450 yards per game, and that's the open door that Fred Payton is going to walk right through. I see the Chickens extending their unbeaten streak for one more week at least. At 3:30 on Saturday, and I hate to do this to you, Carla, but this is legitimately an interesting game. Number 17, Indiana at Rutgers. Indiana is favored by 11.5 points. Go ahead.
Let's start with a team that I'm comfortable talking about right now, and that's Rutgers.
Okay.
Was that the biggest surprise of last weekend? You could make that case.
Maybe other than yes. Yes, I'm going with yes. Okay.
See, I'll get there. We're going to talk about Indiana in a second.
Okay.
Rutgers, Michigan State was the game that we literally threw up our hands and said we had no idea, right? Because we had no idea about these two teams. And we still gave the benefit of the doubt. We were both incredibly wrong about this. We gave the benefit of the doubt with the talent level at Michigan State, thinking there was just
that's one of the traditional powers. You assume that's going to at least carry over and count for something.
Right. I thought so. And I watched that score early on, and, you know, admittedly I was out a bit on Saturday. And so I was keeping an eye on that game just because I was curious as to, you know, how that was going to shake out. And I looked at the score a couple times in that first half and I went, wait, what? Which is, I think, what most of the Big Ten did, right? You're looking at that score and you're going, wait, what? Rutgers? Greg Schiano is the only coach at Rutgers that has ever figured out a way to make that team successful. And he went in there since
the mid 1800s.
It's crazy. I mean, Rutgers has not been a good football team, right? Mm-hmm. And Greg Schiano was there and made them a winning program, took them to a couple of bowl games. And then he scoots off to the NFL and he comes back and Rutgers pulls off a win on the road. Right? Like, I mean, that's a huge, huge win. And you go back and you look, and there's a common theme between both Rutgers and Indiana from last weekend. And this is the why I'm going to throw up my hands on this game as well, which might be surprising to people. And that is the fact that both teams benefited from mistakes from their opponent.
Yes. Yeah.
7 Sparty turnovers. Mm-hmm. 7. Rutgers started their possessions more often in plus territory than not. Mm-hmm. Right? So they didn't have to work with a long field. They were able to force, and whether that, you know, it was a combination of forcing Sparty into mistakes or Sparty just flat out making mistakes. Right? Mm-hmm. But Rutgers was able to capitalize on it. Noah Vedral had a decent game at quarterback. He threw a really nice, his last touchdown. I was watching some highlights today. His last touchdown in the fourth quarter was a beautiful fade route to the corner, right over the shoulder of the receiver, to Shameen Jones. It was a beautiful ball. And if he can keep that kind of level of play up, Rutgers, I'm not going to say Rutgers is going to win the East, right? I'm not going to that extreme. Can Rutgers be a 500 football team and maybe eke into a bowl game in a crazy, wacky, whatever 2020 is? I think it's possible based on what I saw last week. Mm-hmm. So you have, you know, and so Rutgers took advantage of Michigan State mistakes, but capitalized when they needed to and put points on the board. That's the exact same thing that Indiana did.
Yes.
That's the exact same thing Indiana did. Because if you look at the drive chart for Indiana in the second half of the football game, punt, interception, field goal, okay, punt, turnover on downs. The only touchdown they scored was the one that Penn State should never have given them the ball back for. Mm-hmm. Right? Right. And so and that's not taking anything away from Indiana. Michael Penix did exactly what he needed to do on that drive to take Indiana down the field to go tie that football game. But they also capitalized from 2 huge Penn State defensive mistakes on that drive. A face mask penalty that shouldn't have happened, and an offside penalty that gave them 20 yards, right? So Indiana, and the first half, Indiana went up by 10 points because Penn State turned the ball over twice, and they immediately capitalized those 2 turnovers into a field goal and a touchdown. Right. Indiana played opportunistic football. So did Rutgers. And we don't have enough statistics on either of these 2 teams to know which one of the 2 is going to be able to force the other one into the mistake. Right? This game is the epitome, is this week's version of the we have no idea. Mm-hmm. Because we really don't know a lot about either of these 2 teams because they both capitalized on their opponent's errors and went to victory. I'll give the edge to Indiana in this game. Okay. It would not stun me to see this game be really, really close. Okay. Closer than what people are expecting. Because I think
the line is dumb. I think the line is dumb.
I think the line is awful. We don't know anything about Indiana, really, right? We know the errors that Penn State made and the fact that Indiana can capitalize on them, and that's what a good football team does. They capitalize on the other team's mistakes. But offensively, their numbers were mediocre, right? You know, and they didn't really move the ball well other than that last drive at the end of the game. That was the only time the entire game that they really had any sort of ball movement. Every other time they were capitalizing on a turnover and starting in better field position. So sure, I'll give the edge. Indiana beat a better football team last weekend than Rutgers did. So I'll give the edge to Indiana, but this game to me is a little bit of a toss up, going to be way closer than the line says.
Okay. you sounded for a moment like you were sort of arguing that Rutgers is going to win this football game.
Whose fault were the 7 turnovers? Like that's the thing that I can't figure. Like
I know, and it is hard, but those games were mirror images in a lot of ways, and you're absolutely right about Indiana. I'm tempted to say Indiana is the same Indiana team that they always are, but that was not the case on Saturday. Penn State's defense did largely what it should do against an offense like Indiana's, and that they really limited it. But Indiana was able to. They won that game with 211 yards of total offense. That's it. That's like a quarter for some of the other teams in the conference. I look at this. I don't get. There's some kind of weird New Jersey thing going on. Greg Schiano had success there. He left. Couldn't make it work in the NFL. Obviously was a coordinator for a while before he got this job again, and suddenly he's freaking Newton Rockne. I don't know. I don't know how that happens. Yeah. I don't know how it happens. And that is of course a gross overreaction after 1 week of college football.
It's Overreaction Monday.
Hey,
we get that. Yeah.
Here we go.
We're allowed to overreact. This week 1. Let's go.
The thing that would, if I'm a Rutgers fan, I'm concerned because they gave up a lot of yards in the air last weekend. And I think that's generally, not necessarily last weekend, but that's generally the strength of Indiana's offense. Although Michael Penix was a little more balanced from that. But I feel like I feel like Schiano is just going to work some kind of magic here. And these teams are certainly much more even than the line would indicate. And I think Rutgers is going to win this game at home and go to 2-0 in the conference for the first time ever, as far as I can recall. That's going to be an interesting one to watch. As will this one. At 7:30 on Saturday, on number 3 Ohio State at number 18 Penn State. Ohio State is favored by 12. Again, I think that line is generous. And I will say off the bat that this game has my college football neuroses just screaming off the charts. But Carla, I will let you go first.
Well, most of my notes, since we talked a lot about Indiana, most of my notes are how Penn State can win this football game after a devastating loss, right? Because that's an emotional blow to a team to do that. So most of my notes are, here's what needs to be fixed, right? And honestly, it's mental errors. It's coaching errors. Penn State flat out had too many mistakes. And it was interesting watching that game. Sean, we talked about the new offensive coordinator last week. Sean Clifford did not look fully comfortable in that offense the entire game. He looked uncomfortable. He was constantly glancing at the sideline. This was not the same Sean Clifford that we saw last year, who looked like he had total control of that offense. Now, true, he's lost some weapons around him. I get that. And the biggest loss that I could tell, and the biggest problem that Penn State is going to have this year, is the fact that last weekend, against a team that they should have been able to run the football against, Penn State had no visible ground game beyond Sean Clifford scrambling out of the pocket.
And Noah Brown, second tailback. I mean, that was something that just announced today that the second tailback is lost for the season.
Yeah. So it's not good. The run game for Penn State doesn't exist right now. And it didn't last week because Sean Clifford was their leading rusher, right? And we've talked about that. How many years have we talked about that? When your quarterback is your leading rusher, you may have problems on offense, right? And that's where that's where I'm sitting right now, firmly in the seat as being at least right now a Penn State fan. Is there's no run game, and that's a problem. That's a real problem, especially when you've got a quarterback that is still learning a new offensive system. You've got to have that support around him, and Clifford just does not have that right now, to the extent that he made some pretty decisions that he doesn't make, right? And that's what led, 2 interceptions in the first half, lead immediately to 10 points for Indiana, and there's your ball game. But just some disciplinary errors too, right? The face mask late in the game, the offsides penalty that gave Indiana life on a play that could have been, I think it was a 3rd and long, and it ended up being a 3rd and manageable, right? For God's sake, take a knee, Devin Ford. Take a knee, right? And he thought about it, but it was too late. Like, that was the thing.
He was literally, when his foot stepped right in front of the line, he's like, oh wait, and his momentum, he couldn't do anything to stop it.
He couldn't do anything about it, right? Like, you just take a knee, you kneel it out, you kick the field goal, you're up 24-20, and Indiana gets the ball back with 17 or 18 seconds left in the game.
It was heartbreaking to see,
right?
Legitimately, and I'm not a Penn State fan, and it's that kid. Oh man, I feel so bad for him.
Yeah, and everybody's talking about the 2-point conversion at the end of the game that Indiana won it with in overtime, and Braden and I actually talked about this on Twitter, the idea that, like, you couldn't overturn that, and I actually agree with that. Mm-hmm. There wasn't enough evidence. You couldn't overturn it. However it was called on the field was the way that it needed to be called, but it never should have come to that, right? Mm-hmm. That's the whole point of the game, and that's why the Penn State fan is it never should have come to that. Devin Ford takes a knee. You're up 24-20. There never should have been that game tying drive at the end of the fourth quarter. That just never should have happened. But then once it did happen, Penn State made too many mistakes, and they made too many mistakes throughout the whole game. The only way that Penn State has hope in this game is if they clean up their own house. That's exactly what needs to happen here. If they keep making these stupid mental errors, and don't get back into, like, and I realize they've got a new system. They've got new things that they've got to learn. They're missing key players. But after a devastating loss from an emotional and a mental standpoint, and a game that was lost, not because the other team was that much better than you, but because you kind of beat yourself. And you gave the other team the opportunity to take advantage of, which they did, which does not say that's not me saying that Indiana is a bad football team. That's Indiana doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
When any team gives you those opportunities, you've got to take them. And Indiana did that. Penn State absolutely cannot do that at home in Beaver Stadium against an Ohio State team, where if they give them any wiggle room, the game's over. Right. This is a game that you've got to play near perfection against a really, really good opponent. Right. You cannot lose to yourself in this game. I joked with you as I was watching the beginning of the Ohio State Nebraska game, when Nebraska went up 7-0, and then Ohio State scored the next 17 points. Yeah. And I texted you and said, oh wait, Ohio State just played cat and mouse with Nebraska, didn't they? Yeah. I mean, that's really what it felt like, right? Like, fine. Let Indiana go down and score that and get their hopes up, and then let's go destroy them, right? Uh-huh. I'm real concerned about that as a Penn State fan this week. Okay. I'm real concerned about that because I think there's a possibility that Penn State is going to come out with a vengeance after losing that game.
You're concerned about that?
And Ohio State's going to play cat and mouse with them. Okay, sure. Yeah, here's a touchdown. Go ahead, score. Get some momentum. There's nobody in the stands. Playing in Beaver Stadium means nothing. Mm-hmm. And now we're going to use our physical size and the way that we dominate the line and the fact that you can't run the football and the fact that we have a pretty decent secondary. It's really hard for me to say, Penn State's going to win this football game. Like, I have to because I'm a fan, right? Like, I'm a fan, and this is the one time of the year that I'm like, yeah, Penn State wins. You turn the ball over once, you can't run the football. If this was at home in a whiteout situation, I would say absolutely Penn State wins this football.
I would be terrified, for the record, if that were the case.
Absolutely Penn State wins this game at home. But there's a lot of stuff here, and it's going to take a lot of work for Penn State to win this football game. The one good thing going for them is Penn State's defense looked really, really good. Mm-hmm. And the line looked really, really good. They only allowed 41 yards of rushing to Indiana. Yeah, it's Indiana, whatever. But like, that's still 41 yards for an entire game is pretty pretty tight defense. And my God, Shaka Toney. Holy cow, Shaka Toney. There was that one Indiana possession where literally he was in the backfield every single down. Like it was just like Shaka Toney, sack. Shaka Toney, sack. And
Shaka Toney.
Like that's the one thing we got going for us. Maybe we can minimize the Ohio State run game a little bit. And I really wish we could run the football, because that was your weakness last week. You gave up a bunch of run yards again to Nebraska, and I don't know if we can do anything about it. Like, we can't run the ball to begin with. Like, okay, great, you gave up 200 yards of rushing, whatever. Okay. Sure, a miracle happens. I'm gonna go like Rice, right? Like if Rice can quadruple dunk or doink. That's the word I was looking for, not dunk, doink. If Rice can quadruple doink a field goal, Penn State can find a way to win this game at home. There, done.
But it's true. I was upset that Penn State lost last week, because I'm like, oh man, and this is the college football universities that I referenced earlier, that just like, they're going to be motivated. They're going to be pissed off. This is their chance to make up for that. And this is not what I wanted. So good stuff from Ohio State last week. Justin Fields, wide receivers and tight ends. Defense eventually, not so good. Justin Fields, Carla, we just spoke of this. Justin Fields was Ohio State's leading rusher.
Yeah, I did see that.
You can't run the football with an experienced backup who gained almost 800 yards last year, and you could not run the football with a transfer from Oklahoma, who I believe was a former starter. And it took a long time for the defense to actually get wound up. It didn't amount to points on the board, but giving up 2 touchdowns in the first half versus a field goal in the second half, that felt like a dramatic difference. And Nebraska is a better team. I think there's no question about that. But man, they're not Penn State. And those weaknesses are amplified against a Nittany Lions team. Anyone who an Ohio State fan who looked at the Penn State loss last week and was happy about it and what it meant for this weekend is dramatically incorrect. Because the Penn State team, there are losses from injuries, and the running back stuff would be a real concern. But this is still that team. This is still the top 10 matchup that everyone was anticipating. Penn State is not. Excuse me. Penn State is not a bad team. And now they have an extra bit of motivation, and it's kind of frightening from my standpoint. Ohio State is capable of correcting the stuff that was a drag in the game against Nebraska last weekend. If they can, I'm comfortable saying that this is actually this could be a comfortable win. If they don't, if the problem with the running game is a real actual problem against a defense that's better than Nebraska's, then man, this is going to be tight. Penn State's good enough to beat Ohio State. Don't think anything else. I think Ohio State can fix enough stuff, combined with especially issues with the Penn State running game, which would help them kind of speed the game up and time of possession and all that stuff. That would help them a bunch. But I think Ohio State's going to fix enough of the problems from last weekend that they will win this game on Saturday night. Boys and girls, you can hear the Carla and Crappy Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, whatever it is, Stitcher, etc., etc., etc. You can watch us on YouTube and on the show's Facebook page. If you'd like us, please subscribe, rate, and review. If you don't, mind your own damn business. Be sure to come back here next week to see exactly how wrong we were. And we picked 2 games differently, so we'll see. We'll have another chance to see how wrong each of us was. Carla, do you have any final thoughts?
One final thought this week.
Yes.
We haven't brought out the Clemsoning index in a long time.
We have not. And boy, that was a tight game, surprisingly, last weekend for them.
Yeah, I mean, they still won by like 20. Right? Like, I'm going to bring out the Clemsoning index for Boston College at Clemson this weekend. That's a 4-2 Boston College team. Now, true, they've lost to every team that's been ranked that they have played, but it's a Boston College team that has raised some eyebrows in the ACC, and Clemson's favored by like 31.5. This is one of those games that I would be like, beware of Clemsoning. This is one of those games, right? If we were still doing the Clemsoning index, this would probably be at a 6 for me. Okay. And enough that it would get my attention. Boston College likes to pass the football. Now Clemson's pretty good at, is technically the top rated pass defense in the ACC, but they're still giving up a bunch of yards in the secondary. So can BC hang with them? I think BC can hang for a while. Let's see what happens. But keep your eye on that one. That that's a noon kick. Again, big nude. Forget big nude. Like, go watch the game on ABC. Flip between that and ESPNU watching the Coastal game. Those are both going to be better football games, I think.
Because you don't have enough options on noon Saturday. My other suggestion, if you happen to be a group of 5 fan who likes Midwestern football, that, perhaps not the crazy scoring, perhaps good defense, Cincinnati at Memphis. Cincinnati, and I did not write this in my notes. I think they're number 7 right now. They are having an amazing season, and I think clearly the best group of 5 team in the country at this point. But they have the solid offense, great quarterback play, and it's Luke Fickell. So the defense has been sparkling. They are playing at a more traditional group of 5 kind of a team in Memphis, and that Memphis wants to score a bunch. That's going to be a good game as well. So you got Coastal, you've got Clemson and Boston College, you've got Cincinnati and Memphis. God, don't watch the Michigans. That's it. That game's just going to be painful. Just don't do it. I'm Carla and I are both on board with AJ for this one. Pick a group of 5 game at noon on Saturday and watch that one, because it's going to be way more fun than anything else. Carla, oh geez, I have just a little beer left in here, and that's
I've got just a little wine left.
That's probably just fine.
It's 2020. Like, what are we gonna do?
It's 2020. It is Halloween week, so I think all this stuff is allowed, including some scary games on Saturday for both of us. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to come back next week and join us again as we take you through some more games. Carla, enjoy your week. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Thank God for Reese's. I'm going to need a whole bunch of them for that game on Saturday night.
Oh, I like it. Cheers, guys. Thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you again soon.